Hi, third graders. We're back with Reading Poppy, and this week we are on chapter 14. It's called On the Way to Newhouse. The old porcupine moved faster than Poppy thought possible, body swaying from side to side, quills rattling like a snare drum. The trail Earth took was narrow but smooth, avoiding hills, tangles, and fallen trees. From time to time, Poppy saw other animals, weasels, a raccoon, a ferret, and once a bear. As soon as they caught sight of Earth, they hurried away in haste. Poppy bounded along after Earth, pausing now and again to gaze upon the endlessly enticing forest with delight and amazement. In low places, white ground mist eddied gently, while above in the high trees the early sun soughed golden sparks among dark leaves. But once, while Poppy was staring wide-eyed at a particularly towering tree, she caught sight of what appeared to be a brown blur swooping among the pines. Her joy melted. "I think Mr. Oacox is following," she called to Earth. Earth, however, did more than grunt and press forward. Poppy caught up with him and from then on stayed as close as possible. But with every third step, she glanced back. Finally, she actually saw Mr. Oacox. He was high above, gliding through the treetops on widespread wings like a silent phantom. "He is following!" Poppy cried. "Bug brain," Earth mumbled. Then, no matter how much Poppy searched, her neck grew strained from so much turning and twisting, she lost sight of the owl. At last, she decided he had gone. More relaxed, she paused now and again to take in the forest views. It was while she stopped to sniff a Scotch broom plant that Mr. Oacox, out of nowhere, made a dive at her, talons flashing. "Oacox!" Earth bellowed. Without looking, Poppy leaped towards Earth for protection. The porcupine, for all his bulk, whipped about and lifted his short and hissing the porcupine whipped about and lifted his tail, prepared to strike with his quills. Mr. Oacox pulled up short, hissing venomously, flew aloft, and vanished. "Oh, that was close," said Poppy. She was panting. She was trying to see where Mr. Oacox had gone. What made you notice him?" "Poppy, if you think there's anything that's going to keep me from that salt, then you don't know me." Once more, the porcupine trundled along the trail. "Earth," Poppy panted, straining to keep up, "I'm certain Mr. Oacox wants to keep me from Newhouse. There must be something he doesn't want me to see." Earth stopped abruptly and gave a snort. "Poppy, some creatures aren't worth trying to figure out. If they bother you, what I say is swat 'em with your tail." "Earth, not every tail has quills." "You're right. I shouldn't hold yours against you." And he set off again. "Earth," Poppy said after a while, "if I could just find out what it is that Mr. Oacox is frightened of and tell my family, I wouldn't care what happened to me." Earth laughed sarcastically. "Even if it kills ya?" "Well, no, but Poppy, if you don't stay alive, the only thing you'll be good for is maggot mush." As they traveled further, Poppy noticed that the trees were growing less dense. There were a greater variety of flowers, too, and as the brightness intensified, Poppy guessed that they were reaching the northern limits of the forest. "Here," she said again, "when we get out of the woods, where will we be?" "Well, first there's a dirt road, and then an old barn, and then a field of corn. Beyond the corn is some low grass, and then the building where the people live. There's also a new big barn. That's for chickens." "Oh, what are people like?" Poppy asked. Other than pictures in the magazines back home, she had never actually seen any humans. "They don't bother me." "Do they dance a lot?" "What's dancing?" "It's gliding and swirling and dipping and sliding with someone you like." "You are strange," the porcupine said. "Now, don't try to distract me." on the short grass, not far from the cornfield, is this salt lick. You figured out a way to get it for me? Here, I haven't ever seen it, Poppy answered. Oh, it's beautiful, Poppy. Really beautiful. They had reached the northern edge of Dimwood Forest. Beyond the last of the trees, Poppy saw a dirt road. Even farther was a depleted barn, smaller than the gray house and considerably older. It stood on the edge of the field, leaning over slightly. The field itself was full of tall stalks bearing plump and tasseled ears of corn, tossed by a gentle breeze. Row upon row rustled and whispered with the heavy ripeness. Earth trotted along the dirt road. Come on, move it! The porcupine scolded once he looked back and saw Poppy on the other side. I'm checking for Mr. Ocox, Poppy called across, though since the owl's one attempt to grab her, she had not seen him. Deciding he was either gone or hiding, she darted across the dirt road and rejoined Earth. Let's go! The porcupine cried and plunged into the cornfield. Beating his way through the stiff stalks, Poppy paused now and again in his wake to snack on the fallen corn, which lay about in great quantity. Compared with the fallen fields the mice scored near Gray House, the profusion of food here was a marvel. Back home, the food the family had access to took long hours to find, and there wasn't that much of it. Here was food enough to feed a family twice their size. Was it this rich field that Mr. Ocox wished to hide? Did he want her family to go hungry? All that searching for food out in the open did make them vulnerable. Oh, there! Earth cried when they finally burst through the far side of the cornfield. Look! Poppy sat up. Before her was a nearly cropped grass lawn. Not far from them stood a smooth, shiny pole as high as a cornstalk. It was capped by a large block of white salt. Isn't that something? Earth whispered. Poppy glanced at her friend. He was drooling. Now that Poppy could see what she had promised to bring Earth, her heart sank. How in the world would she be able to do it? It was perfectly clear that even if she could manage to get the salt off the pole, it was too large and huge for her to carry. The problem itself was too huge to carry. With a sigh, Poppy looked farther. Beyond the salt lick was a white house. It bore some resemblance to Gray House, but its paint was bright and its windows were nearly curtained, signs that suggested that people were living there. Was this what Mr. Ocox didn't want them to know about? Poppy turned to the left and saw a red barn. It was considerably larger than the house, but had only a few windows. The roof was highly pitched and covered with sheet metal, and at the front end of the barn, the roof jutted out to form a door hood. Poppy gasped. Sitting right below the overhang, near a large closed window, was an owl. An owl twice the size of Mr. Ocox.